Imagine it is early spring, 1914,
Okay, setting the scene.
and you are dressed in your absolute finest evening wear. You are walking into the Teatro del Verme.
Which is this incredibly ornate, velvet-lined, highly respected concert hall in Milan, Italy.
Exactly. So you're expecting a very polite evening of classical music, right?
Right, like maybe some Beethoven or Mozart.
Yeah. You sit down in your plush seat, the heavy curtain rises, the conductor steps up to the podium and raises his baton.
Standard stuff.
But instead of a symphony orchestra holding violins and cellos, you are staring at a row of men standing behind these giant, brightly colored rectangular wooden boxes.
Just massive boxes on stage.
And out of the front of each box protrudes this huge metallic megaphone.
Oh, wow.
So the conductor drops his baton, and the men just start aggressively cranking these handles on the sides of the boxes.
They're literally cranking them like machines.
Yes. And suddenly, the whole theater is filled with the deafening, grinding, shrieking sounds of factory whistles, roaring engines, shattering glass, and heavy machinery.
And, I mean, the audience reaction is immediate, and it is violent.
Oh, completely.
Like, within minutes, people are throwing vegetables, they're shouting, some are physically climbing onto the stage.
Fights are breaking out in the aisles.
It is an absolute riot.
It's the literal definition of sonic warfare. And the guys cranking the boxes, they aren't running away.
No, not at all.
They are actually fighting back. They are punching the audience members while just continuing to crank out this wall of industrial noise.
Which is just an incredible mental image.
It really is.
Wow.
Well, welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm so thrilled you're here with us today because we are plunging headfirst into one of the strangest, loudest, and honestly most genuinely mind-bending chapters in the history of art.
It really is a wild ride.
Our mission today is to uncover the absolute origins of noise as an artistic material. We are going to explore how the grinding, chaotic roar of the modern world went from being a terrifying nuisance to becoming the very fabric of musical expression.
And to do that, we are zeroing in on the Italian futurist movement of the early 20th century.
Exactly. It's an incredibly turbulent era to examine.
Yeah, and the ideas generated there, they still echo in almost everything we listen to today.
We have a massive stack of historical and theoretical sources to guide us through this one. We are synthesizing insights from Jacques Attali's groundbreaking book, Noise, The Political Economy of Music.
A fantastic read.
We are also pulling from Caleb Kelly's Cracked Media, Douglas Kahn's incredible historical overview, Noise, Water, Meat, David Toop's Ocean of Sound, and we are going straight to the primary texts themselves.
The actual manifestos.
Yeah, the actual howling, aggressive manifestos written by the Futurists. Because the central paradox we are teasing apart today is this, how did a group of radical Italian artists end up building these bizarre wooden boxes in 1913 to celebrate the roar of industrialization, and in doing so, accidentally prophesy the apocalyptic violence of World War I?
So before we jump into that paradox, I do need to step in and offer a vital note on the material we are about to navigate today.
Okay, cool.
Because these sources cover some intensely politically charged ground.
Yeah, they really do.
We will be examining Jacques Attali's frameworks, which rely heavily on Marxist economic models. And of course, we will be spending a lot of time with the Italian futurists themselves.
Who have a very dark history.
Exactly. Their glorification of violence, militarism, and extreme nationalism eventually led to deeply problematic flirtations with and direct support of fascism.
Right.
So I want to make it explicitly clear to you, our listener, that this deep dive is not taking sides.
Not at all.
We are not endorsing any of these political ideologies, left-wing, right-wing, or otherwise. Our goal is to impartially examine the historical ideas, the acoustic theories, and the actual texts presented in these sources.
Just looking at the history of an idea.
Precisely, so we can understand the evolution of sound art.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand why a group of artists in 1913 would risk getting punched in the face just to play the sound of a factory in a concert hall, we have to deeply understand what the world actually sounded like right before they arrived.
We have to completely reset our acoustic expectations.
Because it was very different, right?
Oh, fundamentally. If you look at the historical record, specifically drawing on the acoustic ecology work detailed in our sources, you have to imagine the pre-industrial soundscape.
Okay.
Try to picture human life in antiquity right up until the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. For the vast majority of human history, the world was, by our modern standards, shockingly quiet.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. The acoustic environment was dominated entirely by the sounds of weather, of animals, and of human muscle.
So you'd hear the wind in the trees, maybe a blacksmith hitting an anvil, the clopping of a horse on a dirt road, or someone chopping wood.
And that's about it. The loudest thing a human being might ever experience in their entire lifetime would be like a massive thunderstorm or maybe a church bell ringing in the village square.
That's hard to even fathom now.
Right. And because of this, the signal-to-noise ratio in the environment was incredibly high.
Let's define that for a second. Signal-to-noise ratio. What does that actually mean for someone walking through an 18th century village?
It means that if a sound occurred, it had a distinct physical boundary, and you could immediately pinpoint its origin.
Sure.
The background noise of the world was so low that any signal, say a dog barking or a cartwheel squeaking, stood out perfectly clearly.
It wasn't competing with anything.
Exactly. It had a distinct meaning, and you could hear it from a mile away. You had what acoustic ecologists call an acoustic horizon. You could hear deep into the distance.
But the Industrial Revolution fundamentally, violently altered that human oral reality.
It brought an absolute permanent end to that silence.
The sources describe this shift using a really evocative term. They call the Industrial Revolution the creator of a lo-fi soundscape.
Low fidelity.
Right. In this new lo-fi world, the signal-to-noise ratio drops to 1-to-1.
Meaning the background is as loud as the signal.
Yeah. Suddenly, there is so much acoustic crosstalk, so much continuous mechanical drone from steam engines, weaving looms, and locomotives, that the background noise becomes just as loud as the actual signal.
It becomes physically impossible to know what you're supposed to be listening to.
Exactly. The noises of modern industrial life swing the balance completely against the noises of nature. You lose your acoustic horizon.
You can barely hear the person standing next to you, let alone the dog barking a mile away.
And the psychological impact of this cannot be overstated, right?
Oh, it was a physical assault on the human nervous system.
Yeah.
We have these visceral panicked reactions recorded by writers who were living through this exact transition.
Like Stendhal.
Yes, take the French writer Stendhal. In 1830, he is traveling through the French provinces, places that had been agrarian and quiet for centuries, and he is just absolutely startled by the intrusion of heavy industry.
I have that exact quote pulled up, actually,
Yeah.
and you can literally feel the physical vibration in his words.
Let's hear it.
Stendhal writes, "No sooner has one entered the town than one is startled by the din of a noisy machine of terrifying aspect. A score of weighty hammers, falling with a clang which makes the pavement tremble, are raised aloft by a wheel which the water of the torrent sets in motion."
It's so dramatic.
He keeps talking about the blows of these enormous hammers. He isn't describing a bustling, productive economy. He is describing a monster.
It's an invasion.
Yeah, an invasion.
But the human mind is incredibly adaptable, sometimes to its own detriment. Fast forward from Stendhal in 1830 to the early 20th century.
Okay.
The soundscape hasn't just stayed loud, it has become infinitely denser, faster, and more relentless.
Right, we're getting into combustion engines and electricity now.
Exactly. And we have a journal entry from D.H. Lawrence in 1915, and he is describing the continuous throb of winding engines in the English fields.
Right, and Lawrence's reaction is so different from Stendhal's panic.
It really is.
Lawrence notes how, at first, the rhythmic run of the machinery was startling. But then he says that eventually that mechanical throb became a narcotic to the brain. A narcotic.
That specific word choice reveals a massive psychological shift.
How so?
Well, a narcotic implies intoxication. It implies a dulling of the senses, a dependency. The noise went from being an unwanted, terrifying disruption to an addictive, numbing necessity.
Wow.
The machine, with its incessant vibrations, began to intoxicate humanity. People stopped fighting the noise and started surrendering to it.
I was thinking about this when I was going through my notes. It's exactly like living next to a train track or right off a really busy modern highway.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
If you've ever moved into an apartment like that, you know the first week is hell. Every time a semi-truck hits a pothole, you jump out of bed. The noise is a violent intruder in your personal space.
Right, you can't sleep at all.
But you give it a month, maybe 6 months, and your brain just rewires itself. The drone becomes the baseline. And suddenly, if the highway shuts down for construction in the middle of the night, the sudden absence of that noise is what jolts you awake.
The silence becomes deafening.
Exactly. You actually need the drone of the tires to sleep. So the question I kept asking myself reading this history is, Did humanity just get used to the noise of the Industrial Revolution out of a grim necessity to survive? Or did we actually start to crave it?
I wouldn't say the general public actively craved it in the beginning. It was more of a necessary psychological defense mechanism to survive that new lo-fi environment.
That makes sense.
But your question points perfectly to the anomaly of this era. There was one specific group of people who rejected the idea of just enduring the noise.
The Futurists.
Yes. They didn't want to numb themselves to it. They wanted to worship it. They looked at the smoke, the steel, and the deafening roar of the city, and they thought it was the absolute pinnacle of human achievement.
And those were the Italian Futurists. Which brings us to the guy who wrote the instruction manual for this whole philosophy, Luigi Russolo.
Luigi Russolo is the crucial protagonist in this early chapter of sound art.
Definitely.
What is utterly fascinating about Russolo is that he wasn't even a musician.
Wait, really? He wasn't trained?
No, he didn't come from the conservatory. He was a painter. And originally, he had these marked symbolist leanings, painting very ethereal, moody, psychological landscapes.
Okay, so a total visual artist.
But through his association with the Futurist movement, he pivots and becomes what historians now call the very first important noise thinker.
He's the guy who writes the text that basically detonates the entire history of Western music.
He really does.
In 1913, Russolo writes a manifesto titled The Art of Noises, or L'arte dei rumori. And it wasn't even initially meant to be a public declaration, right?
No, it originally was just a passionate letter to his friend.
Right, Francesco Balia Portella, who was the resident composer for the Futurists at the time.
And in this letter-turned-manifesto, Russolo constructs an argument that goes straight for the throat of the classical tradition.
He holds nothing back.
His core thesis is that traditional orchestral instruments and the classical compositions written for them have totally and completely exhausted their emotional power.
He thinks they're dead artifacts of a dead era.
Exactly. He doesn't pull any punches either. He calls out the absolute heavyweights.
Oh yeah, he says, look, for years, the great masters like Beethoven and Wagner shook our nerves and hearts. They gave us these grand, sweeping, romantic emotions.
But now...
But now humanity is satiated. We are bored.
We need more.
Yeah. The traditional symphony orchestra with its violins and flutes is too small, too clean, and too polite to represent the violent, high-speed reality of the 20th century.
Russolo pushes the philosophy even further. He argues that pure musical sound, like the mathematically perfect clean note of a violin string or the exact pitch of a piano key, is estranged from life.
He calls pure sound monotonous.
He does.
Which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
How can he call a Beethoven symphony monotonous? That seems absurd on its face.
It sounds absurd until you understand his definition of reality.
Okay, explain that.
Russolo argues that pure, isolated sound simply does not exist in nature anymore, and it certainly doesn't exist in the modern city.
Oh, I see.
Every single manifestation of real modern life is accompanied by complex, messy, overlapping noise. Therefore, a perfectly clean violin note is a lie. It's a fiction.
Because it's too perfect.
Yes. Noise, on the other hand, arrives confused, irregular, and rich in acoustic overtones. Because of that chaos, noise has the unique psychological power to immediately recall life itself. It violently snaps you back to reality.
He paints this incredibly vivid picture of what he calls an urban symphony. And I absolutely love this passage from the manifesto.
It's so descriptive.
He tells his readers that the modern man finds far more genuine enjoyment in combining the noises of trams, backfiring motors, carriages, and brawling crowds than in sitting in a stuffy room rehearsing Beethoven's Eroica.
He is finding actual transcendent aesthetic pleasure in the sound of a traffic jam.
Exactly. He says modern life requires us to develop futurist ears.
He is demanding a total recalibration of human aesthetics. He wants the listener to walk through a great modern capital city with their ear vastly more attentive than their eye.
That's a huge shift for a painter.
Right. He writes about listening to the gurglings of water, air, and gas inside metallic pipes. He wants us to appreciate the stridency of mechanical saws cutting through wood, the snapping of horsewhips, the grinding of the department store sliding doors, and the screech of the subways.
He essentially looks at the entire industrial infrastructure of Milan and says this is the new orchestral section.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though. If you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, okay, so Russolo loves the sound of the factory. Why doesn't he just go stand outside a factory and listen? Or why not just record a factory and play it back on a phonograph?
The logical question.
But he explicitly argues against doing that.
Yeah.
Our sources, specifically the Douglas context, point out that Russolo thought strict naturalism caused the degeneration of music.
Meaning simply imitating machines or making raw field recordings of nature.
Right. He didn't just want a raw recording of a street corner. He wanted to organize the noise.
That distinction is so important. It separates Russolo from just being an eccentric who liked loud sounds and elevates him to an avant-garde pioneer.
Yeah.
He wasn't acting like a documentary filmmaker holding up a microphone to capture reality exactly as it was. He wanted to isolate those chaotic industrial sounds, understand their acoustic properties, extract them from their practical context, and then exert total artistic control over them.
He wanted to build a brand new musical language out of the raw material of the industrial age.
Exactly.
The analogy that immediately came to mind for me is the difference between a farmer and a Michelin star chef.
Oh, I like that.
Russolo didn't just want to pull raw, dirt-covered vegetables out of the ground, the literal sounds of the street, dump them on a dining table and call it a meal.
Right.
He wanted to be the chef. He wanted to take those raw ingredients, chop them up, apply heat, mix them with contrasting flavors, and deliberately craft a complex, intentionally designed dish.
A fantastic analogy.
He desperately wanted the flavor of the factory, but he demanded the right to dictate the recipe.
He wanted to take the raw sonic data of the modern world and bend it to his will, but that ambition hits a massive technological wall in 1913.
Oh yeah, a huge wall.
Because how do you actually organize raw sonic data back then? You can't just boot up a laptop, open a digital audio workstation like Pro Tools or Ableton, and start dragging and dropping audio files.
Sampling technology does not exist.
Precisely. So what do? You have to physically build entirely new machines to make the noises you are hearing in your head.
You have to become an acoustic engineer.
Exactly.
And so we arrive at the creation of the Intonaro Mori. Russolo teams up with his close friend and collaborator, a painter named Ugo Piatti.
Another visual artist.
Yeah. Together, they lock themselves in a studio and actually design and physically construct a literal orchestra of noise-making machines.
They call them the Intonaro Mori, which translates from Italian to noise and toning instruments.
And if you look at historical photographs of these things, they are absolutely bizarre. They don't look like any instrument you've ever seen.
No, not at all.
They are these bulky, brightly colored, rectangular wooden boxes. Out of the front of each box sticks this massive, metallic, megaphone-like acoustic horn.
They look like props from a retro-futurist 1950s sci-fi movie, but built in 1913.
Let's pop the hood on these boxes and break down the mechanics based on the historical texts, because the engineering of the Intonaro Mori directly reveals Russolo's underlying philosophy.
Sure, let's look inside. Inside these wooden boxes, they primarily utilized a scraped string principle.
Okay, break that down for us. What does a scraped string principle actually mean mechanically?
Imagine a hurdy-gurdy, or if you are familiar with Indian classical instruments, a kamak spring drum.
Okay.
Inside the box, there is a taut gut or wire string. One end of this string is attached to a drum skin or a diaphragm.
Which acts as the resonator, right?
Exactly, and that is connected to that giant megaphone on the front to amplify the sound. The other end of the string is attached to a tension lever.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now, the crucial innovation, the thing that makes the noise happen, is a rosin, wooden, or metal wheel that rests against the string. When the performer turns a hand crank on the outside of the box, it spins the wheel.
And that creates the friction.
Yes. The wheel violently scrapes against the string, causing it to vibrate. That raw, grinding vibration travels down the string, hits the drum skin, and gets blasted out of the megaphone.
It's so physical. But why a hand crank and a tension lever? Why not just have keys like a piano?
Because keys restrict you. The crank and the tension lever allowed the instruments to be what Russolo called enharmonic.
Let's clarify enharmonic for the listener, because it's the key to his whole musical rebellion.
Please do.
In traditional Western music, we have strict scales. Think of a piano keyboard. You have a C key, you have a C-sharp key, and you have a D key. There is a discrete mathematical step between those notes.
You are locked into a grid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you want to go from C to D, you have to jump.
And Russolo hated the grid. The tension lever on the Intonaro Mori allowed the performer to change the pitch of the grinding noise fluidly.
So they can just slide between notes.
Yes, gliding up and down the pitch spectrum without ever stopping at those specific locked-in notes. It could perform a continuous wailing glissando, exactly like an air raid siren or an accelerating motor.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
This was Russolo's mechanical genius. He figured out a way to give deliberate, controllable pitch to a noise without depriving that noise of its irregular, confused, gritty vibrations.
Because machines in the real world, the trams, the factory engines, they don't hum in a perfect C major chord.
Right, they groan, they whine.
They slide up and down in pitch depending on the speed of the motor and the friction of the gears.
Mm.
The crank and the lever allowed him to perfectly replicate that sliding mechanical reality.
And he didn't just build one prototype and call it a day. He built an entire family of these boxes, categorized by the specific type of noise they mechanically produced.
And the names he gave them are just fantastic.
They really are.
According to the manifestos, he had 6 main families of noise for this futurist orchestra. He had the howlers, or ululatori in Italian. He had the hummers. He had the cracklers,
The bursters.
the whistlers, and my personal favorite, the gurglers.
Just listening to those names, howling, crackling, bursting, gurgling, it gives you an immediate sense of the visceral texture he was after.
Yeah, it's very evocative.
He is moving completely away from the polite terminology of the orchestra, like violin or oboe, and focusing purely on the raw acoustic action.
Right.
But beyond mechanics, there is a profound psychological motivation at play here.
Right.
If we synthesize what acoustic historians are saying about this moment, the Intonara Mori were essentially an elaborate attempt to domesticate and control the terrifying sounds of the industrial era.
Domesticating the industrial. I love that framing. Explain how building a loud box tames the factory.
Think back to our earlier discussion of Stendhal. Stendhal was physically terrified by the giant autonomous industrial hammer.
Yeah, he felt it in the pavement.
The industrial world was physically overwhelming, it was dangerous, and it made humanity feel incredibly small and powerless. The machine was in control.
True.
But by building a wooden box that sounds exactly like a dangerous factory, and by putting a hand crank on it, Russolo is literally taking the terror of the autonomous machine and putting the power to generate it back into the hands of the human artist.
The human is now the one turning the crank.
Exactly. The artist reclaims dominance over the industrial roar. He symbolically shrinks the massive, dangerous factory down to the size of a box he can play like an instrument.
It's a psychological coping mechanism disguised as avant-garde art.
It really is.
But I have to point out a hilarious irony here that I couldn't stop thinking about as I read through the schematics.
What's that?
The Italian futurists are absolutely obsessed with the future. It's in their name. They're obsessed with electricity, with combustion engines, with the hypermodern. And yet, to celebrate this electrified future, what does Russolo actually do? He builds wooden boxes powered by human muscle turning a hand crank.
It's very true.
He is using incredibly old analog instrumental technology, like levers, catgut strings, wheels, and drum skins, to simulate the sounds of the future.
It's a total paradox.
It's like someone today trying to celebrate the hyper-modern, AI-driven digital age by carving a smartphone out of wood and powering it with a steam engine. It's a completely analog simulation of a mechanical, electrified world.
It is a striking contradiction, but it highlights the paradox of Russolo. Philosophically and theoretically, he was decades ahead of his time. He saw the future of electronic music.
But technologically.
Technologically, he was firmly bound by the acoustic tools available in a 1913 workshop. He was forced to build these analog simulations in a safe studio environment.
Yeah.
But here is where the story takes a much darker turn.
Right, because of the rest of the movement.
Exactly. While Russolo was tinkering in his workshop, trying to safely control and domesticate the noise, the driving philosophical force behind the broader futurist movement was out seeking the ultimate, deadliest, most uncontrollable noise in the real world.
Because Russolo wasn't the leader of futurism. He was just essentially their sound guy. The movement itself was founded by a man named F.T. Marinetti.
And Marinetti is a figure of immense charismatic energy and, frankly, terrifying ideology.
Oh, absolutely terrifying.
He's the author of the original founding Futurist Manifesto in 1909. If Russolo was the ear of the movement, Marinetti was the fist.
That's a great way to put it.
He idolized speed, he idolized electricity, the motor car, and, most disturbingly, he idolized violence and war. In his 1909 manifesto, he explicitly referred to war as the soul hygiene of the world.
The soul hygiene of the world. It's a chilling phrase, especially knowing what was coming just a few years later.
Extremely chilling.
And for Marinetti, war wasn't just a grim political tool for the state. It was the ultimate aesthetic experience. It was the ultimate soundscape.
He sought it out actively.
He was deeply obsessed with military conflict. The historical sources note his experiences acting as a war correspondent in the Italo-Turkish War in 1911 and later during the Balkan Wars at the Siege of Adrianopolis.
And he wasn't behaving like a normal reporter.
No. While normal correspondents are reporting on troop movements or the human tragedy, Marinetti is out there on the front lines, taking frantic notes on the acoustics of artillery fire.
The Douglas context details Marinetti's experiences brilliantly. Marinetti is standing on the battlefield witnessing horrors.
Yeah, real horrors.
He witnesses the mass machine gunning of 3,000 horses by a Turkish general. He watches some of the very first uses of airplanes in modern combat, and rather than recoiling, he is invigorated.
It's so twisted.
He actually claimed that the sheer acoustic violence of a whirling airplane propeller literally taught him the destruction of syntax. The mechanical, indifferent violence of modern war became his ultimate literary muse.
Which directly leads to his magnum opus, if you can call it that, a piece of onomatopoeic poetry called Zang Tum Tum, published in 1914.
Yes.
It is his manic attempt to capture the literal sound and chaotic feeling of the Siege of Adrianopolis using only typography and phonetics on a printed page. I have to read a piece of this translated text from the source material because just describing it doesn't do it justice. You have to hear the sheer aggression of it.
Please read it. It fundamentally requires a vocal performance. It's not meant to be read silently in an armchair.
Okay, here we go. He writes, every 5 seconds, siege cannons gutting space. With a chord, Zang 2 and 2 carry you new mutiny of 500 echoes scattering it to infinity. In the center of this hateful Zang 2 carry you area, 50 square kilometers, leaping bursts, lacerations, fists, rapid-fire batteries.
And then just breaks down.
Yeah, he just devolves into these raw, explosive, phonetic sounds, completely terracotta, the machine guns screaming, pick back, bum tomb, crook crag, zing, glizing, shack, back air, biko um.
It is pure phonetic chaos.
It's just explosions of hard consonants hitting you in the face. And what's wild is how it looks on the page. It's not printed in neat stanzas.
Not at all.
The words are scattered, printed in massive bold font. Some words are curved, some are tiny. It visually looks like shrapnel hitting paper.
That visual layout is essential to understanding the mechanism of what Marinetti is doing here. He is applying his radical concept of parole in libertà.
Which translates to words and freedom.
Exactly. He is deliberately and aggressively freeing words from the traditional rules of syntax, grammar, adjectives, and linear meaning. He doesn't want the words to gently describe a distant event to the reader. He wants the words to act as raw sonic impact.
Like physical projectiles.
Yes, he wants the poem to hit the reader's ear and eye like physical shrapnel.
And Luigi Russolo, our Box Billy Noise guy, totally bought into this militaristic obsession.
Hook, line, and sinker.
In his book, The Art of Noises, Russolo devotes an entire chapter specifically to the noises of war, and he makes a highly specific, deeply critical observation about the nature of modern mechanized combat. He says that in modern warfare, the element of sight is reduced to almost zero.
Which is very accurate. Think about the physical reality of a World War I battlefield. It's often night. There are massive clouds of smoke and mustard gas everywhere.
You literally can't see.
The enemy is entrenched miles away. The artillery trying to kill you is being fired from beyond the visible horizon. You cannot see the threat. And because of that profound visual deprivation, the ear takes over.
Hearing becomes the primary indispensable survival tool.
Exactly. Russolo writes about how soldiers in the trenches quickly learn to judge the exact caliber of an incoming grenade or a shrapnel shell entirely by the specific frequency of the whistling noise it makes before it explodes.
What?
They can hear a marching enemy patrol in the pitch black. For the Futurists, the horrors of war actually rationalized their theory of the art of noises. It proved their point that the ear was superior to the eye in the violent modern age.
But I have to say, as I was reading all of these breathless manifestos and poems about artillery, I just felt this intense, deeply relatable horror.
It's very disturbing material.
If you're listening to this, you're probably wondering the same thing. How could they possibly view mass human slaughter as a positive aesthetic experience?
It defies logic.
They're writing these excited, energetic poems about the sounds of artillery shells tearing human bodies apart. It's so deeply disturbing. They completely sociopathically detached the fascinating sound of the machine from the tragic human cost it inflicted.
It's a total disconnect.
It's like they treated the bloody battlefield of Adrianopolis and later the trenches of World War I like it was some kind of giant avant-garde music festival. They were raving in the middle of a slaughterhouse.
It is entirely revulsive. It represents a profound failure of human empathy, completely blinded by a fetishization of technology and power.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
But that revulsion you feel, that the listener feels, is the exact perfect entry point for understanding why the futurists were so irresistibly drawn to this violent noise, even if they couldn't articulate the deeper reason themselves.
Oh, interesting.
They weren't just being edgelords trying to shock the bourgeoisie for the sake of it. There was a massive, deeper structural shift happening in global society that their art was subconsciously channeling.
Okay, wait on me.
And to truly understand that mechanism, we need to bring in the heavy theoretical framework of the French economic and social theorist Jacques Attali.
Yes, this is where the deep dive takes a massive, brain-bending theoretical turn.
If we connect the futurists' bizarre behavior to the bigger picture of human history, Jacques Attali's 1977 book, Noise, The Political Economy of Music, offers an absolute paradigm shift in how we understand the relationship between art, sound, and society.
It flips everything we assume.
Usually the traditional common sense view is that art simply reflects society. Society changes, say a war happens or an economy crashes, and then a few years later, artists paint a painting or write a song reflecting on that change.
Right, the old Shakespearean idea that art holds a mirror up to nature. The event happens first, the art documents it second.
Exactly. But Attali looks at history and completely flips that chronology on its head. He argues that music and noise do not just passively reflect society, they actively anticipate it.
They prophesy it.
Yes. To use the Marxist terminology that Attali employs in his book, we usually think the economic and political base of society dictates the cultural superstructure, the art, the music, the philosophy.
Right, economics first, culture second.
Attali says no. In the specific realm of sound, the cultural superstructure actually prefigures the economic base. His most famous defining quote is, "Our music foretells our future."
Wait, I really want to make sure we nail down Attali's definitions here, because they are crucial to understanding this prophecy.
Go ahead.
He essentially breaks all of human acoustic history down into this cosmic ongoing battle between order and subversion.
Right.
According to Attali, noise, raw, unorganized sound, is born disorder. He calls it a simulacrum of murder, which is a wild phrase.
It's very intense.
It represents interference, chaos, the raw, violent, unpredictable energy of life. Music, on the other hand, is society's effort to codify, stratify, and control that violent noise.
Music represents political power.
Exactly. It represents the establishment taking the chaotic noise of the world and locking it into a nice, neat, predictable 4/4 time signature.
And this raises a fascinating critical question. If traditional organized music is the sound of established political power maintaining order, what happens when artists, like the futurists, deliberately start smashing that order and bringing raw, violent noise back into the concert hall?
What is that signal?
According to Attali, when artists introduce new, radical noises, they aren't just making a stylistic choice, they're subconsciously prophesying a massive impending rupture in the social and political order. Artists are highly sensitive instruments. They hear the tremors of the future, the coming violence, long before the economists, the politicians, or the generals do.
And when you map Attali's theory onto the timeline of the futurists, it is so perfect it's genuinely scary. Let's look at the dates.
Let's do it.
Rousseau writes his manifesto demanding the sounds of war and builds his howling, grinding into memory boxes in 1913. Marinetti is publishing Zang Tum Tum, mimicking the scattered acoustics of machine guns and exploding artillery in early 1914.
Right before everything changes.
They're dragging the chaos, dissonance, and mechanized violence of industrial noise into high art. And what happens exactly a few months later, in the summer of 1914?
The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and the eruption of World War I.
Exactly. The greatest mechanized slaughter in human history up to that point. The immense social ruptures, the use of poison gas, the collapse of entire global empires that defined the trajectory of the 20th century.
It aligns perfectly.
Attali's theory powerfully suggests that Russolo and Marinetti weren't just reacting to the local factories around Milan, they were acting as the unwitting, tragic prophets of a world that was about to literally tear itself apart with those very same machines. Their noise in the concert hall was the harbinger of the artillery in the trenches.
It is a profound historical alignment, and Attali's theory cuts both ways.
What do you mean?
If the reintroduction of noise prophecies subversion, chaos, and violence, what does highly controlled, heavily codified, inescapable music prophesy?
Oh, that's a creepy thought.
Our sources point out the deeply dystopian flip side of Vitali's framework. If music is the sound of power organizing society, then ubiquitous, perfectly controlled background music is the sound of absolute surveillance and social control.
Oh, this is where the text brings up the Muzak example.
Yes, the text explicitly mentions the Muzak Corporation. We tend to think of elevator music as just annoying, harmless background fluff.
Right, just something to fill the silence.
But in the 1970s, the Muzak Corporation literally presented itself in its own marketing materials as a security system.
That is so sinister.
It wasn't just entertainment. It was a scientifically designed acoustic tool deployed to control the social environment. It was designed to subtly dictate the mood, the heart rate, and the productivity of workers in factories and consumers in shopping malls.
Using music as a leash.
As Atali would frame it, Muzak is the monologue of power, disguised as pleasant entertainment, functioning in a space where no one else has the right to speak or be heard.
So what does this all mean when we put it together? When I try to synthesize Atali's massive theory, the analogy that jumps out to me is that artists are essentially society's weather radar.
Oh, I like that.
You look at a radar screen on a normal day, and it's clear. But then the artists, the avant-garde, start picking up strange static. They start broadcasting dissonance, howling, crackling, and uncomfortable noise.
And people hate it.
Right. To the rest of the public and to the critics, it just sounds like annoying garbage. But if you understand Atali's theory, if you know how to read the radar, that static means a massive cultural and political hurricane is forming just off the coast, and it is about to make a violent landfall.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the dynamic. The Futurists were this highly sensitive, highly erratic weather radar, predicting a storm of unprecedented violence.
But they couldn't survive the storm themselves.
That is the ultimate tragedy of the Futurist movement.
Yeah.
They accurately predicted the storm, they ran out into the pouring rain to enthusiastically celebrate it, but they had absolutely no idea how to build a sustainable musical shelter from it.
Their tools were just too crude.
Their physical instruments, the intonaramori, were incredibly clunky to play. Their politics became violently toxic, and their actual musical compositions, like how they arranged the noise, were frankly not very compelling.
They had the raw material, but they didn't know what to actually do with it. So if the Futurists were just the erratic radar, the pioneers who crashed upon takeoff, who actually took this massive acoustic discovery and built something lasting, who actually built the shelter.
To find the artist who successfully harnessed this energy, we have to transition away from Italy and look at the work of a visionary French-born composer named Edgard Varèse.
The man who actually made noise work.
Edgard Varèse was born in Paris in 1883, and he became a towering giant of musical modernism.
He was super connected, too.
He was deeply embedded in the avant-garde scene. He sat by Claude Debussy's fireplace, he was close friends with Eric Satie, he interacted with Picasso, Cocteau, and, crucially for our story, he befriended Luigi Russolo.
Oh, they knew each other.
Yes, Varèse lived right in the center of the exact same vortex of modern energy that birthed the Futurist movement.
But despite their personal friendship and shared circles, Varèse was brutally, devastatingly honest about Russolo's intonaramori.
He did not mince words.
He judged the physical machines incredibly harshly. I have the quote from David Toop's Ocean of Sound right here. Varèse said the noise instruments produced material, for the most part, of terrifying intractability.
Terrifying intractability.
And he went further, comparing the experience of playing them to an Ethiopian lion's roar, which, if you don't know, is basically a primitive friction drum made from a hollowed-out log.
That's quite an insult.
Varèse said playing Russolo's intonaramori was like doing a lot of hard manual digging, getting down on your hands and knees, and just blindly shouting into a hole in the ground.
It's a devastating, slightly condescending critique. But we have to understand why Varèse rejected them.
It wasn't because he hated noise, right?
No, Varèse loved dissonant, powerful sounds. He rejected the intonaramori because he felt Russolo didn't push the philosophy far enough.
That was so.
Russolo was fundamentally trapped in the idea of literal imitation. Russolo was building physical boxes simply to sound like a factory. He was trying to directly replicate the specific sounds of cars, trams, and war.
He was just copying reality.
Varèse realized that as long as you were just imitating the real world, you were creatively limited by the real world. You are just doing acoustic naturalism. You aren't creating art, you're just making a low-quality recording.
So how did Varese fix it? What was his mechanism for moving past imitation?
Varese made a massive evolutionary conceptual leap forward. He entirely abandoned the idea of imitating machines. And at the same time, he fully abandoned traditional musical scales and melodies.
That's all that's left.
Instead, he developed a radical new concept that he called pure organized sound. He stopped thinking about music as a sequence of notes and started thinking about it as the movement of what he termed sound masses.
Sound masses. That sounds almost architectural.
It is entirely architectural and spatial. He viewed sound as colliding volumes and densities in physical space. He took the raw, dissonant, powerful energy that the futurists discovered, but he stripped away the literalism.
He made it abstract.
Yes. He didn't want a sound that reminded you of a car engine. He wanted a dense block of low frequencies crashing into a piercing shard of high frequencies. He made noise abstract. He made it structural. He proved that noise didn't have to be a gimmick. It could be the foundation of a completely new, rigorous musical language.
Okay, I have an analogy for this transition. Think about the history of human flight.
Okay, let's hear it.
The futurists, Russolo and Marinetti, they are like the very, very early crazy pioneers of aviation. The guys jumping off bridges with wooden wings. Right. They conceptually proved that you could theoretically get off the ground.
Right, but barely.
But they did it by building these clunky, bumpy, highly dangerous wooden contraptions. And half the time, they just crashed straight into the mud.
Yes.
Varese is the brilliant aeronautical engineer who comes along a decade later. He looks at their wreckage, he understands the underlying aerodynamics of what they discovered, and he uses that knowledge to build the first modern, sleek jet engine. He takes the raw power of the explosion and focuses it into forward momentum and altitude.
That is exactly what happened. Varese took the raw propulsion of the futurists' noise and gave it a chassis that could actually fly.
It's an amazing evolution.
And examining Varese's success leads us perfectly into reflecting on the profoundly strange, somewhat tragic, yet wildly impactful legacy of the futurist noise project as a whole.
Because if we look at the physical, tangible legacy of what Russolo actually built, it is absolutely heartbreaking. We mentioned earlier that he and Piatti built an entire orchestra of these Intenaromori.
Yes. Quite a few of them.
Well, almost none of it survives today. The original historic machines were stored in a facility in Paris, and they were completely destroyed in a bombing fire during World War II. They burned to ash.
Which is incredibly ironic.
The physical artifacts of the revolution were wiped out by the very mechanized war they idolized.
And the tragedy extends to the audio record as well. You would think, okay, the physical machines burned, but surely they made recordings. And they did. But the only surviving recording we have of the Intenaromori from their heyday, made in 1924, is practically unlistenable.
Is it just too chaotic?
It's not because the noise is too radical for our modern ears. It's because Russolo's brother, Antonio, decided he wanted to compose the piece being recorded.
Oh, no. What did Antonio do?
Antonio wrote this incredibly bland, polite, inconsequential, meandering salon music for traditional strings and winds, and he just lazily layered the howling Intenaromori over the top of it.
That sounds terrible.
It is a complete stylistic mismatch. It sounds like a bad high school orchestra playing a waltz while a street sweeper runs right outside the window. Furthermore, the acoustic recording technology of 1924 simply couldn't capture the extreme frequency range and dynamic power of the growling boxes. It sounds thin and rady.
What a shame.
It's a massive historical tragedy that we will never truly hear what that 1913 concert sounded like.
There is also this amazing chaotic anecdote from the sources about a later, slightly more advanced version of the machine Russolo built, which he called the Rumor Armonio.
Right, he tried to upgrade it.
He actually tried to market this one commercially for silent film accompaniment, trying to make some money off the idea. He installed a Rumor Armonio in Studio 28, an avant-garde cinema in Paris, in 1930.
And what happened?
And the machine was severely damaged when right-wing fascist groups actually rioted in the theater during a screening of Luis Buñuel's surrealist anti-clerical film L'Âge d'Or. So the machines literally ended up getting smashed in the ideological crossfire of the 1930s.
What's fascinating here, when you step back and look at the whole picture, is the ultimate paradox of the futurist movement. Think about the ledger of failures we have just discussed.
A long list.
The physical machines were destroyed in the war. The one audio recording we have is terribly composed and poorly recorded. The founder of the movement, Marinetti, tied the whole aesthetic philosophy to a horrific glorification of violence that bled directly into Mussolini's fascism.
Yeah. By almost every single tangible, physical, and political metric, the futurist foray into noise was a catastrophic failure. And yet, their core conceptual breakthrough, this idea of the liberation of sound, the radical premise that absolutely any sound in the universe can be intentionally used to make art, it fundamentally, irreversibly changed the world of music.
It's incredible when you trace the family tree. You look at the direct descendants listed in the historical texts. You have French composers like Pierre Schaeffer and Pierre Henry in the 1940s and 50s.
Musique concrète?
Yes, taking literal field recordings of trains and spinning pops and manipulating them on magnetic tape to create musique concrète. That is a direct, undeniable line from Russollo's theories.
Absolutely.
Fast forward to the 1980s, and you literally have a massively popular British avant-pop group who blatantly name themselves the Art of Noise, using early digital samplers to create pop hits out of engine sounds. And if you look at the underground industrial music scene of the late 70s and 80s, the lineage is even more direct. Bands like Einstürzende Neubauten in Germany or Test Depth in the UK, literally bringing scrap metal, shopping carts, pneumatic drills, and power tools onto the stage and banging on them to make brutal rhythmic music.
That is the exact urban symphony that Russollo dreamed of in his manifesto finally brought to life.
The text even mentions 90s turntablists like DJ Spooky, manipulating the physical noise of the vinyl record itself, the scratching, the hiss, turning the playback medium into the instrument.
Which is so cool.
And on the totally opposite end of the spectrum, you have modern acoustic ecologists, people who go out into nature to map the sounds of environments, actively trying to recover what they call positive silence by fighting against urban noise pollution.
They're all reacting to the same thing.
Both the industrial bands and the acoustic ecologists are operating entirely in the lo-fi, one-to-one signal-to-noise ratio world that the futurists were the very first to identify and articulate.
I just marvel at how a failed physical experiment created such a wildly successful philosophical virus. It's like a defunct tech startup from the early 1990s.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Imagine a company that had a terrible, toxic CEO, terrible office politics, their actual hardware caught on fire, and they went totally bankrupt. But right before they went under, a rogue engineer wrote this one tiny, brilliant piece of open source code.
Yeah.
And 100 years later, the company is dead. But that open source code is quietly running the back end of the entire modern internet. That is the true legacy of the futurists.
That analogy perfectly encapsulates Attali's theory of prophecy. The noise the futurists made did not survive as popular music, but it survived as an architectural blueprint. It paved the way for the entire sonic landscape of the 20th and 21st centuries.
Well, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started with Stendhal shaking in terror at the sound of an industrial hammer in 1830.
We read Luigi Russollo's passionate 1913 letter demanding a new orchestra of howlers, cracklers, and gurglers.
We felt the intense revulsion of Marinetti's obsession with the acoustics of war and the phonetic typographic shrapnel of his poem Zangtumtim.
We unpacked Jacques Attali's chilling theory that all of this avant-garde noise was actually a subconscious cultural prophecy of the mechanized slaughter of World War I.
And finally, we saw how Edgard Varèse rescued these radical ideas from mere imitation, creating the rigorous organized sound that ultimately birthed a century of industrial, concrete, and electronic music.
It's quite a journey.
It really is. So I want to leave you, our listener, with a practical challenge. The next time you are stuck in gridlock traffic on your commute, or you are standing on a grimy subway platform waiting for a delayed train, or you are just walking past a massively loud construction site in the center of your city, don't immediately reach for your noise-canceling headphones to block it out.
Take a second to really hear it.
Exactly. Take a single second to actively, intentionally listen. Try to identify the howlers in the distance. Try to pick out the cracklers and the gurglers in the machinery. Try to hear the underlying rhythm in the chaos. You might just find that, over a century later, you have finally developed futurist ears.
And I will leave you with a final lingering question to mull over, building directly on Jacques Attali's theory of musical prophecy. We know now that the harsh, mechanical, physical, grinding noises of 1913 accurately prophesied the massive mechanized world wars and the factory line conformity of the 20th century.
Right.
So apply that radar to today. Listen to the music of right now. Listen to the deeply fragmented, hyper-processed, algorithmically generated, AI-driven digital soundscape that surrounds us everywhere we go. If our music truly foretells our future, what is the deeply synthetic noise of today prophesying about the society we are about to become?
Oof. That is a heavy thought that will keep me up tonight. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your ears open, keep questioning the frame, and keep listening closely to the world around you.